right, well, hey, good morning. Hopefully it'll get a little cooler here in just a second, so bear with us. A lot of you showed up today. We weren't really, we were expecting it, but you're here, so awesome. So glad you're here this morning. We are still in our series, The Gospel According to John, and we're going to be in John chapter 10, if you want to go ahead and turn there today. In our series, as we've gone through the Gospel of John, we've said that John has captured 7 I am statements by Jesus. 7 times where Jesus made a declaration of his divinity, that he was in fact God by saying, I am. And so his audience at the time, the Jews of Jerusalem, recognized that when he said, I am, fill in the blank, that he was saying, I am God. And so today we're actually going to get 2 I am statements, really just a couple of sentences apart from each other. One of them, though, is the most personal I am statement for us. It's one that we ought to latch hold of. And so we're really going to spend some time on that one today. But while you're turning there, we need to kind of reorient ourselves. And if you weren't here, I'll catch you up real quick. Because what's going to happen today really happened immediately after what happened in chapter 9. And so let me catch you up real quickly on what you missed in chapter 9. So in chapter 9, John tells us that Jesus had gone and healed a blind man, a man that had been blind from birth. And that was problematic, okay? It was a good thing, but it was problematic because he did it on the Sabbath. And so the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees, they kind of caused a ruckus over this. So they questioned the blind man, they questioned his family, his friends, because they didn't believe that God would do something so good, right? Jesus giving that man his sight back changed his life forever, right? Totally changed his life. God, there's no way God would do something so good and yet violate the Sabbath. But as we saw last week, Jesus really didn't violate the Sabbath. What he violated were their rules that they had built around the law of God. And so they'd put barriers in front of barriers in front of barriers around the law. So what Jesus did violate were their rules. And in fact, they had elevated their rules over the law of God. And in essence, they had elevated themselves over God as well. So they try and get the man to confess publicly that Jesus is a sinner. And by doing that, that would have discredited what Jesus had done, which was give him his sight, but it would also discredit any other miracles Jesus had done or would do. The man refused because he thought, hey, he did something only God can do. He gave me my sight back. So he refused. So John tells us that they put him out of the synagogue. In other words, they kicked him out, right? We said, because that was more than just, hey, you can't worship in this place anymore. That basically changed his life forever. He was disowned, if you want to look at it that way. And so it changed everything about his life. They basically were saying, you can't be part of us anymore. You're no longer part of us anymore. And so it's on the heels of that Jesus in John 10, verse 1 says this to the Pharisees. It says, very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Now, a sheep pen, because this really isn't sheep country, but a sheep pen would be what we would think of as a corral, right? So this is cattle country. So you've probably seen a corral before where they keep cows. It'd be the same thing, except that it was made out of rocks or out of stones, and so it had 4 low walls, no roof, and it had a really small opening in one of the walls to let the sheep in and out of the pen. Now, because Israel is very volcanic, so it's very rocky. In parts of it, there's not a lot of grass, okay? So multiple families would share pasture land. So they would graze their sheep together. And so as the sheep were out grazing during the day, at night they would gather them up and put them in the pen for safekeeping. You know, keep them all together so one guy could watch over them. So that they'd go in through the gate. Only the gatekeeper, the person who watched over the pen, was the guy who could say who could go in and out of the pen. Because people might show up and say, hey, I'm here to get my sheep, right? They were basically going to steal the sheep. And Jesus is saying, only thieves and robbers come over the wall. Because authorized people, true shepherds, come in through the gate, right? Now, in the original language, that thieves and robbers, the word thief implies trickery. Okay, the word robber implies violence. Keep in mind, he was talking to the Pharisees as he's telling them this, okay? So as we see it, right, in 2020, we're like, yeah, he's talking to you, Mr. Pharisee, but they weren't cluing in here, right? So the gatekeeper knows the true shepherds because he sees the shepherd coming to get his sheep every day. He knows, oh, this guy, he's coming to get a sheep. He's good, right? The sheep know the voice of their shepherd, though. So the gatekeeper didn't have to go in there and pick them up and carry them out. I mean, the shepherd, all he did was stand at the entrance and call his sheep out because they knew his voice. Verse 4. When he brought out all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. So when a shepherd calls or leads out his sheep out of the pen, he goes ahead of them. He leads them, right? And they follow him out of the pen. They actually then follow him to whatever pasture land they're going to. But they follow him because they know his voice. They recognize the sound of his voice. Because shepherds spent so much time with their sheep, that's why the sheep became accustomed to their voice. You can imagine, right? You're out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of sheep all day long. You're probably going to talk to the sheep just to kill time. You know, in our minds, we have this imagery of the American West of the cowboys on their horses, right? Singing to the cattle. Probably the same thing happened with the shepherds and their sheep. They probably sang to them, talked to them, whatever. But sheep are super nervous animals. They're very skittish. And so if a stranger tried to go and get sheep that weren't his own, the sheep would panic. They'd run away. In verse 6, John tells us Jesus used this figure of speech. This is not a parable, okay? There's a different word for parable. So John says, Jesus used this figure of speech, and they didn't understand. It'd be like you saying, hey, it's raining cats and dogs outside. It's not really raining cats and dogs, right? It's just a figure of speech. You're kind of substituting one thing to illustrate something else, and that's what Jesus was doing here. But because the Pharisees didn't understand him, Jesus goes on and says, therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now that therefore in there means because Jesus had used this figure of speech and the Pharisees weren't tracking with him, Jesus goes again. He says, all right, let me say it this way to you, all right? So Jesus says, he makes his first I am statement. I am the gate, right? The sheep pen only has one way in or out. It's this little opening in the stone wall. And Jesus says, I'm that gate. I'm the opening into the sheep pen. And it's interesting that Jesus didn't say, I'm the gatekeeper, right? That's a person. He said, no, I'm literally the gate. There's only one way in and out of the sheep pen, right? I am that entrance. There's only one way in, and it's through me. Only one way in and only one way out. For us, there's only one way into the care of our loving God, right? It is through the gate. It is through Jesus who says, I am the gate. There's only one way in, and it's through me. In addition, though, only authorized shepherds were allowed to pass through the gate. That was the gatekeeper's job, to make sure, hey, can you come into the sheep pen or not? Jesus was saying, if you've gotten into the sheep pen and you didn't come in through me, then you must be a thief or a robber, because only thieves or robbers would go over the wall. And this is what he's saying to the Pharisees. I didn't let you in. My Father didn't let you in. So you must be a thief or a robber. Jesus had Ezekiel 34 in mind when he's saying this to them. Here's what the prophet Ezekiel wrote. He said, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? Remember what just happened in chapter 9, right? What we started with. The shepherds of Israel, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, have kicked a man out of the flock. Why? Because give him his sight back. That's not taking care of the sheep. What they were concerned with is if people believe that Jesus really did this, if people believe that Jesus did this miracle, people are going to follow after Jesus. They're not going to follow after us. We are at risk here. So we'll just kick the guy out of the flock. In other words, we'll sacrifice the sheep for the shepherd. Jesus declares that he is the gate. He's the only legitimate way into the sheep pen. If you exit through him, you know you are exiting with your shepherd, right? Who will lead you out to pasture land, who's leading you out to take care of you. The thief, you know, if the thief comes over the wall, you know that the thief has come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Jesus makes it very clear who the shepherd is and who the thief is here, who the robber is. And he's talking to the Pharisees saying, I don't know who you guys are, but you're not the shepherd of these sheep. Clearly, you've demonstrated that you're thieves and robbers. Jesus came that the sheep, that we might have life. That's what he said, right? That they would have life abundant. We've talked about this before. It's not existence, okay? For the sheep, existence would look like we're going to stay in the pen. Somebody's going to have to feed us. Somebody's going to have to water us. We'll be hemmed in by four walls all day long. We'll always be worried as sheep about what's coming over the wall. Am I going to get killed? Am I going to get injured, right? Fearful of the unknown. Life to the full for the sheep is being led out by the shepherd to green pastures, to lay and feed in luxurious green grass, to be able to lie down by still waters, okay? Still waters meaning it's safe to drink. I'm not going to get swept away in the current, that there's good, clean, moving water, and I'll have everything I need. And I'll be free. I won't be hemmed in by these walls. I won't have to worry about the thief because I have the shepherd right there to protect me. In the same way, that's what existing looks like for us as well. When we settle, right, to be hemmed in by the things of this world, when we build walls around us based on status, based on job, based on relationships, we're already naturally hemmed in by the walls of sin and death. Okay, that's what Jesus rescues us from when he comes to the sheep pen to take us out. Jesus came to lead us out of existence into life more abundant, free from the constraints and fear of sin and death, free from the thief, right? From the unknown, worrying about what's going to happen next, what's going to become of me, how is this all going to play out? You're not worrying about that because you know that the shepherd's going to take care of you, right? Because Jesus does that, he then can say, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. This is the most personal I am statement that Jesus makes. Of the 7 he makes, this is the one that talks directly to us. We had to grab this and claim it because it tells us not what Jesus does for us. The other 2 statements we've seen so far, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world. Those speak to what Jesus does for us. This speaks to how Jesus feels for us, who Jesus is for us. He is the good shepherd, right? It's personal. He is our good shepherd. 3 things today that we're going to look at that we can see from that statement, that Jesus is the good shepherd, that he's your good shepherd, and that he's my good shepherd. The first one is this: he knows us. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Shepherds know their sheep like no other caretaker of animals do because they have to spend so much time with the sheep because sheep are basically dumb. They have to, not that your toddlers are dumb, but you get the illustration here. Toddlers have to be watched all the time, right? Because they don't know anything yet, so they're going to get into all kinds of trouble. When we were young parents, our first two kids were like 18 months apart, so we had two in diapers. And, when they were just lumps of baby and you could sit them in the little bouncy thing, that was awesome, right? You stay there, you don't have to worry about it. But when they became toddlers and they were mobile, you couldn't do anything because you were always wandering. Where are they? What are they getting into? In the same way with sheep, right? You have to constantly watch the sheep. It's not that they're malicious, it's just they're just dumb. They will just keep following the grass, and pretty soon they have no clue where they are. So they've wandered off, right? As I told you before, sheep are skittish, though, too. And this kind of, again, goes back to them being dumb. They wander away from the flock, and they panic when the shepherd goes to get them. They don't recognize the shepherd anymore. They've lost all context. And so they run away from the shepherd, who's actually trying to rescue them. Sounds kind of familiar. Maybe you've heard about that before. Have you ever seen a flock of wild sheep? No, right? Because they're dumb. They would die. They'd all die immediately, okay? They need a shepherd to take care of them, right? They're defenseless. They're totally dependent upon their shepherd. In Texas, I think kind of here though too, but mainly in Texas, they have a wild hog or feral pig problem there where, pigs have gotten away and they, bred like crazy. And so there's hogs everywhere, especially down in South Texas. There's actually TV shows about it too. There's a show, Hogs Gone Wild. Anyone seen that? No? Okay. I didn't think we were really a redneck crowd, okay? American Hoggers, anybody see that? No? All right. Those are real TV shows that are based on this feral pig problem. Listen, Sheep Gone Wild, American Sheepers, really doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? Yeah, it's because there's no excitement there. That would be a short-lived show, right? Episode 1, they all wandered away and died. Okay, new series. We aren't helpless like sheep, but we are totally dependent upon the shepherd spiritually, right? We continually over or underestimate what we're capable of, right? You don't believe me? Let's walk through this exercise. Think back about you, what you believed, and who you were 10 years ago. Good thoughts? Yeah, you were awesome 10 years ago, weren't you? I know who I was. Yeah. So today, current you looks back at 10 years ago you and thinks, what a dummy. Why would I think that? Why did I do that? Forget why did I dress that way, right? Why did I wear my hair that way? Just why was I that way? I'm so glad I've gotten past that. I'm so glad I've got that all figured out now, right? You think we're evolving. We're good. I'm past that. But here's the deal. Future you, 10 years from now, will look back at current you and say, what a dummy. Why did I think that? Why did I believe that? Why did I act that way, right? So we under or overestimate what we're capable of constantly. Andy Stanley's a pastor in Atlanta, says we're all one bad decision away from stupid. And it's so true. The first time I heard that, I was like, preach that to me every day, okay? Because I'm on the cusp of a bad decision every day. So we always over or underestimate what we're capable of. If you don't believe that, right, we are sheep, right? We are the flock of the Good Shepherd. Here's what we would look like without the Good Shepherd, left to our own devices. Now, two things we should notice here. Number one, that sheep thinks he's flying. He's like, I'm awesome. I'm flying. Okay, number two, watch that one in the middle in the back there. He's like, I'm out of here, right? He's the only smart one in there. He's like, no, this can't be good. I don't think this ends well. I'm out. Okay. We need the Good Shepherd in our lives, all right? Number two, he sees our worth. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Because the Good Shepherd values the sheep, right? He lays down his life for them. He sees value in them, so he lays his life down. The hired hand lays down the life of the sheep because the only value he sees is in himself. He does not value the sheep. If sheep are so dumb and so helpless and so problematic, right? Why would anybody mess with them? Why would you get in the sheep business? Okay, why were they so prominent in Jesus' day? Why were there so many illustrations about the sheep? It's because pound for pound, they were the most valuable animal that you could own. Think about it this way: wool, milk, meat, hide, all usable from that animal, right? The shepherd that owns the sheep wasn't concerned about the stock market. He wasn't concerned about his Roth IRA, because everything he owned was walking around in a little wool suit out there, right? All of his investment was in those animals because they were so valuable to him, right? The shepherd leaves the 99 to go after the one because the one is valuable. And it doesn't matter which one, any one of the 99 he would go after. When Jesus said the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, in the original language, that word "for" could be read as "in place of." And so you could say, the good shepherd lays down his life in place of his sheep. In place of. In other words, the good shepherd, in essence, becomes a sheep in our place. He cares that much for us that he's willing to become one of us. Because of sin, our natural tendency, though, is to run away from the good shepherd, right? We're like those sheep that wander off and get lost and then forget that the shepherd's really there to protect them, and so they panic and run away. That's us because of sin. Away from the protection of the shepherd, we are destined for death and destruction at the hands of the thief, right? Because he comes to steal and to kill and destroy. And Jesus steps in. Jesus, the good shepherd, steps in and says, "No, I'll go in your place." But not only did he say he was willing to lay down his life in place of the flock, he did it. The prophet Isaiah wrote this. He said, "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent." Jesus looks at us and sees that we are sheep, often dumb, helpless, prone to wander. He sees our innermost thoughts. He sees the depths of our hearts. Think about that. He sees the depths of our hearts. He sees what's really going on inside of us. And yet he feels that we are so valuable that he would lay down his life. The good shepherd lays down his life for the flock. Lastly, we see that he knows what we need. When he has brought out his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. His sheep listen to his voice. He calls us sheep by name and leads them out, right? He leads us out as well. What is Jesus called to his disciples? What is Jesus called all of us? Follow me, right? He's leading. We're following. Follow me. Go where I go. Watch what I do. Do what I do. Follow me. One of Jesus' critiques of the Pharisees, of the religious leaders of his day, is that they put this burden on people's shoulders that they weren't willing to carry, right? They put all these laws in place that said, you got to do all these things. In essence, they were saying they were behind the sheep, pointing things. Go there. Don't do that. Do this. Only do this on this day. They were driving the sheep in front of them. Eastern shepherds lead their sheep out. Okay? They lead from the front. They say to their sheep, follow me, right? They're basically saying, follow me. I'm going to lead you, and it's going to be safe because you're not going to walk anywhere I haven't just walked. Where I have gone, it's okay because I've gone before you. Jesus is leading his sheep out, saying, follow me. It'll be okay. It'll be safe because I've been there already. In the same way, Jesus really doesn't leave us to flounder, though, as sheep, right, on our own. As his children, as the sheep of his flock, he leads us and goes before us, right? The Apostle Paul said this about us. He said, for those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. We are being led by the Spirit of God. The Holy Spirit of God dwells in us to lead us and to guide us, just like a shepherd does, to say, watch out. Those are wolves. Don't go over there. Not only does Jesus lead us, but he calls us by name, right? And the picture here is you have the sheep pen with sheep from different flocks all mixed together. It's the world. Okay? A whole bunch of people, different kinds of people. And Jesus calls his sheep out by name. He knows you by name, right? The shepherds would show up in the morning and call their flock out by name. If you had a flock of 100 sheep, can you imagine? I mean, first of all, I'm not sure I could come up with 100 names. You know, I only have 3 kids, Chase, Chance, and Chandler. And we were pretty tapped out after 3, okay? Chalupa was the next one. If we had 4, because we couldn't come up with any more CHA names, right? But imagine having to name hundreds of sheep. And yet the Good Shepherd knows each of their names. Because Jesus is the Good Shepherd, he knows us by name because he cares for us, right? We're not just another sheep in the crowd. He cares for us and knows us by name. When Jesus says, I know my sheep, that know in the original language means to know through personal experience. He doesn't know about his sheep. He knows them personally through experience. He knows you personally through experience. He doesn't know about you. He knows you. He sees the depths of your heart. He sees your innermost being. And why wouldn't he know you? He knit you together in his mother's womb. Before time began, he knew you. He knew all about you. That's how he can name you and know you. Jesus knows that we all have this innate need to be known, right? Not just to be another face in the crowd, but to be truly known. We all long for community. My fellow introverts are saying, well, hey, hang on, Dean. No, we do. Look, it's just we need smaller community. Okay, I need community. I don't need 10 people, but I need a couple people. We all need community. We want to be known and to be known by others. Your name is part of your uniqueness. Okay, it's part of why you're you. And Jesus calls you by name. Unfortunately, though, because we're sheep, we try to make our own name in other things. We try to make our own name in our job. We try to make our name in our relationships. We try to make our name in stuff, okay? We'll look for anything to make our own name. You've tried to make those things your shepherd. I've tried to make those things my shepherd before. You put your faith and hope and trust in other things. Say, oh, they'll take care of me. If I have that, I'll be good to go. If only this will happen, then I'll be set. And you've moved the mantle of who the shepherd is in your life from the true shepherd, the good shepherd, to other things. You've, in essence, turned to the hired hand. And Jesus said, the hired hand, he doesn't own you. He's going to run at the first sign of trouble. And maybe you've experienced that. You've put your hope in things or other people or relationships or jobs. And when those things have deserted you, and they do, you're left grasping at air. Follow the Good Shepherd. Follow him completely and unconditionally, right? Totally dependent upon him. Let him be your provider and your healer and your protector. Sheep need protecting, right? You picture a sheep in your mind. There's nothing threatening about them, okay? The rams have horns, but put the rams aside for a second. Regular old sheep are just big blobs of wool, basically. And when they're shaved, they look like dogs. So there's nothing, okay? Sheep need protecting. The rod and the staff are the tools of the shepherd. The rod, which is basically a club, is for the wolves. That's how the shepherd protects the sheep, with the rod. If the sheep stay close to the shepherd will protect them from the wolves. The rod is, picture little Bo Peep in your mind. There's that big, long stick with the big curly thing on the end. Now, some Middle Eastern staffs had that curly thing on the end, the crook on it, but not all did. But the staff was for the sheep. It was to protect them. Not from the wolves, protect them from themselves. The shepherd could use the staff to poke the sheep and say, hey, get out of there. You don't belong there. He could use the crook, the curved end, to pull the sheep out of a crevice or out of a crack or out of trouble. He could rescue the sheep from places they don't belong. And so it is with the Good Shepherd, right? Sometimes we need to get poked and we need to get prodded with the staff because the Good Shepherd's telling you that's not for you. Sometimes he has to use the crook, though, and pull you. say, that's trouble. Let me rescue you from that. He knows what you need. He calls you by name. He protects you. He knows you personally, right? Every other religion, the founder died. And the followers were left to rely on the teachings, to follow the teachings of that person. Jesus died and rose again that you could follow him personally because he knows you by name. You are the sheep of his pasture. Listen how David, the man that's described as being after God's own heart, described his relationship with God. He said, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." The Lord is my shepherd. It's personal. It's not, well, the Lord is the shepherd. No, he's my shepherd, right? He is leading me. He's caring for me. He's refreshing me. He's guiding me. He's restoring me. He's comforting me because he is my shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd. He leads us to good pastures. He brings us the water of life, right? He restores frightened and broken sheep. And he comforts and guides us through the valley. He's the hope of all who look to heaven. If you'll just look to heaven and cry out, the good shepherd will rescue you. David goes on, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Now, I don't know a lot about sheep, but I'm pretty sure sheep aren't sitting down at a table to eat. I've never seen that picture of sheep sitting at a table, okay? They're walking around in the pasture. I've never seen a sheep drinking from a cup. I've never seen that happen. Now, again, I don't know a lot about sheep, but I'm pretty sure sheep aren't doing those two things, okay? This is describing more than a shepherd. This is describing a greater gift. This is friendship language. This is a picture of a man throwing a party for his friend, anointing his head with perfumed oil. And then they sit down and enjoy a meal, and their cups overflow with the wine of his goodness and mercy. This is the gift of the very presence of God. Look what happened with David. Notice what happened in that passage. He moved from following, and as he followed, he became friend. He moved from follower to friend. Jesus is the good shepherd, right? He knows us by name. He's calling you by name today. I don't know what he's calling you to. Maybe it's a deeper relationship with him. Maybe he's trying to call you out. Maybe he's using his staff to rescue you from something. And he's calling you by name saying, "My child, come out of that." I don't know what it is, but he is calling all of us constantly. He lovingly leads us into a deeper relationship with him. Will you follow?